At the dawn of his 61st birthday, Richard was greeted by the soft sunlight that bathed the quiet neighborhood, offering a gentle warmth. This was the place where he had spent most of his life. Known for his humble and kind nature, Richard slowly awoke, feeling the familiar stiffness in his muscles, a reminder of years spent working. His career as an accountant had been predictable and stable, and although there had been challenges, he found comfort in its routine. His modest two-story house, which he shared with his wife Margaret, suited him just fine. Richard had never aspired to wealth. Margaret, however, had always been ambitious. With a sharp mind and tireless determination, she easily climbed the career ladder, a fact that never ceased to impress Richard. He admired her success, watching as she gracefully and confidently navigated her career path, while he was content with a quieter role. He always supported her, attending her professional events and celebrating her achievements as if they were his own. That morning, sipping his coffee, Richard reflected on his life, recognizing the significance of this milestone. His thoughts drifted back to his early days, growing up in a small town where his parents instilled in him the values of hard work and honesty, principles that had guided every step of his life. His mind wandered to his marriage, to the relationship that had weathered both joyful moments and difficult times, and how he had always strived to be the best husband to Margaret. Though he was not usually prone to introspection, Richard suddenly found himself thinking about the future. He dreamed of traveling, of seeing the places he had read about in books, and hoped that Margaret would join him on these adventures. He also wanted to spend more time with their grandchildren, sharing the wisdom he had accumulated over the years. Above all, Richard wished for their marriage to remain as strong as it had always been. The day carried with it a quiet sense of anticipation. Margaret had planned a celebration, inviting close friends and family to mark the occasion. Richard appreciated her efforts, knowing how demanding her job was. The house was filled with the bustle of preparations, and Margaret, as always, oversaw every detail with her trademark flair, ensuring everything would be perfect for the evening. Richard watched her from afar, his heart swelling with pride. Margaret had always been the energetic driving force in their relationship, and he cherished that about her. He admired her ability to juggle so many aspects of life while remaining balanced and graceful. He was curious about the surprise she had mentioned, something that was supposed to make this birthday unforgettable. As guests began to arrive, the house filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. Richard moved through the crowd, chatting with old friends, many of whom he hadn't seen in years. They shared stories and reminisced about the past. A sense of gratitude washed over him as he realized that each person present had, in some way, shaped his life. The evening wore on, and the sun slowly set beyond the horizon, filling the house with a golden glow. Richard felt a deep sense of peace. The celebration had gone perfectly, becoming a symbol of the life he had built with Margaret. He watched her moving gracefully through the crowd, the perfect hostess, and he was overwhelmed with gratitude for the woman he had married 40 years ago. With soft music playing, Richard headed to the kitchen to fetch more drinks. Walking down the hallway, he paused, savoring the sounds of joy coming from the living room. The evening was exactly as he had imagined, an embodiment of a life lived with dignity, and at that moment, Richard felt completely at peace, surrounded by love and friendship. He had no idea that this night would change everything. The path ahead of him was unpredictable, but for now, Richard remained blissfully unaware, immersed in the warmth of the present moment. As he approached the kitchen, he heard muffled laughter and voices coming from behind a slightly ajar door. He thought it was just a few guests who had sought some privacy and paid no mind to it. But when he gently opened the door, what he saw made him freeze in place. In the middle of the kitchen, among the remnants of the evening's preparations, Margaret was locked in a passionate embrace with Charlie, her younger colleague. The scene unfolded as if in slow motion, a living nightmare. Richard's mind struggled to process the betrayal happening before his eyes. His heart pounded in his chest, and the familiar kitchen transformed into an alien place, filled with a pain he could never have imagined. Richard froze at the doorway, unnoticed by Margaret and Charlie, who were too absorbed in their intimate world. Only the sound of his ragged breathing broke the silence, causing them to turn, shocked by the unexpected intrusion. Margaret's eyes widened in disbelief, while Charlie's expression shifted from surprise to a brazen smirk. "What is this?" Richard demanded, his voice filled with a mix of fury and confusion. The room seemed to shrink around him, the tension thickening as he waited for answers that never came. The walls of his home felt like they were closing in, suffocating him. Margaret, regaining her composure, met his gaze without a trace of remorse. "Richard, you weren't supposed to see this," she said in a dispassionate tone. "But since you have, let's handle this like adults." Richard's voice trembled, the rage simmering just below the surface. "Handle what, Margaret? The fact that you're cheating on me in our house at my own birthday party? Have you lost your mind?" Charlie, now casually leaning against the table as if the situation amused him, sneered. "Calm down, old man," he said dismissively, his confidence palpable. "What are you going to do about it?" Those words cut into Richard like a knife, each word sharper than the last. A fury he hadn't known before ignited within him, erasing the trust and love he once felt for Margaret in an instant. "You think this is a joke?" Richard growled, stepping forward. "You think you can just walk in here and take what's mine without any consequences?" Margaret raised her hand, her voice remaining cold and detached. "Richard, stop. I deserve happiness. I've worked harder than you ever did and achieved more. This is my life now, and I want you to leave me alone. Get out." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut, each one intensifying the pain. The calmness with which she dismissed their life together, the years they had shared, broke something inside him. Charlie's smirk widened as he added, "Face it, Richard. You were never enough for her, and you never will be." In that moment, everything snapped. Years of frustration and hurt erupted in a violent storm. Richard lunged at Charlie, fists flying. Charlie staggered, unprepared for the force of the blow. Margaret screamed, trying to pull Richard away, but her pleas were drowned out in the chaos. The kitchen became a battleground. Glass shattered, furniture was overturned, and the fight escalated. "Stop it, Richard! You're going to kill him!" Margaret screamed, her voice full of panic. But Richard couldn't stop. His mind was clouded with rage. Only when Charlie lay on the floor, beaten and barely breathing, did Richard finally halt, his breath heavy as he surveyed the destruction. His hands, stained with the aftermath of his fury, trembled as the enormity of what he had done began to sink in. Margaret, pale and shaking, stepped back, her eyes wide with fear. "Richard, what have you done?" In a surge of uncontrollable emotion, Richard's hand lashed out, striking Margaret across the face. The sound of the slap echoed through the room, marking the brutal end to the violence that had unfolded. The full weight of everything, the betrayal, his rage, and now this, crashed down on him with unbearable force. Staggering backward, Richard felt the consequences of his actions wash over him, crushing him under their weight. A distant echo of laughter and music drifted from the living room, unaware of the storm that had erupted in the kitchen. Richard stood frozen, a cold wave of realization washing over him. Everything he had once believed to be secure was crumbling before his eyes. What had started as a festive evening had quickly turned into an unimaginable disaster, one from which there would be no return. The chaos that exploded in the kitchen spread instantly, its echoes reaching every corner of the house. Guests exchanged puzzled glances, stunned by the sudden sound of shattered glass and the rising voices. The once lively conversations dwindled into uneasy whispers, replaced by anxious murmurs. The air became thick with tension as Richard stormed out of the kitchen, leaving behind the fragments of his old life. "What's going on?" a voice called out, but the question hung unanswered in the heavy air. Friends and family shot nervous looks at one another, unsure of how to react to the sudden commotion. Richard pushed his way through the crowd, his chest heaving with a mix of rage and humiliation. His thoughts raced as he tried to suppress the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. The only thing he could think about was escaping the curious eyes and the murmurs. The front door slammed shut behind him as he stepped into the cold night, his breath turning to mist in the cool air. He walked aimlessly down the quiet street, the sounds of the party gradually fading into the ominous silence of the night. With each step, the weight of betrayal grew heavier. The scene in the kitchen played over and over in his mind. Margaret and Charlie, locked in each other's arms, had shattered the illusion of his 40-year marriage in an instant. Inside the house, Margaret stood motionless, trying to gather her thoughts while their guests watched in stunned silence. She knew she had to say something to regain control before everything spiraled further out of control. Clearing her throat, she tried to stifle the anxious whispers, forcing a strained smile. "Everyone, please," she began, her voice tight with tension. "I apologize for the misunderstanding. Please, continue to enjoy the evening." Her words rang hollow, barely concealing the truth, but it was enough to stop the barrage of questions. Gradually, the guests returned to their conversations, though the air remained thick with unspoken thoughts. Margaret felt the weight of their stares, the judgment hanging in the air as the evening dragged on. Charlie, stung by the blow to his pride, quietly slipped out, unwilling to face the consequences of his actions. Margaret watched him go, bitterness and regret boiling beneath her composed exterior. As the night wore on, the guests began to leave. Their farewells were awkward, their eyes filled with unease and discomfort. Margaret knew that avoiding the conversation with Richard wouldn't last much longer. She had to find him before the rift between them became impossible to bridge. She found him sitting alone on a bench in the park, bathed in the dim light of the moon. Richard didn't look up as she approached, his face unreadable in the half-light. "Richard," Margaret called softly, cautiously testing his reaction. "We need to talk." Richard remained motionless, his gaze fixed somewhere in the distance, as if she wasn't even there. The silence grew thicker, becoming unbearable. Summoning her courage, Margaret continued. "It can't go on like this," she said, her voice firmer this time. "We've drifted apart for so long. Maybe it's time to face the truth and end this." Richard finally blinked, his voice raspy and full of disbelief. "End this?" he repeated quietly. "You destroy everything, and now you think the only way out is to leave?" Margaret crossed her arms, bracing herself for what was to come. "I'm just being honest, Richard. We've both been unhappy for a long time." Richard had always taken pride in the effort he poured into his career and the hard-earned independence he valued so much. He wasn't about to let anyone take that away from him. Rising to his feet, filled with frustration, he locked eyes with Margaret. "Unhappy? I stood by you through every trial, Margaret." His voice grew louder with each word. "I supported you when no one else did. And this is how you repay me?" His disbelief hung in the air, heavy and sharp. "You just don't understand," Margaret cut him off, her voice cold, tinged with bitterness. "You've never understood who I truly am." "I need more than what you can offer, Richard. I want out of this marriage, and I'll get what I deserve. You can't stop me." Her words hit like a physical blow, knocking the breath out of him. The finality in her tone left him paralyzed. Richard had always admired Margaret's drive for success, but he never imagined she would use it to destroy their life together. She spun on her heels, her footsteps echoing in the still night as she walked away, leaving Richard alone with the suffocating weight of her ultimatum. He stood frozen, the gravity of her words pressing down on him like a smothering blanket. As her figure disappeared into the darkness, Richard sank back into his chair, his emotions spiraling out of control. He began sifting through memories of their years together, trying to pinpoint the exact moment when everything started falling apart. How could he have missed the warning signs? When had Margaret become this distant stranger he barely recognized? The endless night only deepened his reflection. Over and over he replayed every decision, every compromise, trying to figure out where he had gone wrong. Somewhere along the way, he had lost himself, giving too much to someone who had long stopped caring. But now, as a storm of emotions raged within him, he realized he couldn't let her betrayal destroy him. He needed to reclaim his life, to fight back with a strength he had forgotten. The celebration might be over, but the real battle was just beginning. Taking a deep breath, Richard braced himself for the difficult road ahead. The years of challenges had toughened him, and he would survive this too. As the first rays of dawn filtered through the windows, he sat in the kitchen, replaying the events of the previous night. Margaret's betrayal still stung, but beneath the pain, a resolve was taking root. He knew he couldn't let her take everything without a fight. He needed a plan, a way to protect himself from her threats. Grabbing his phone, Richard dialed the number of a lawyer a trusted colleague had recommended. The first step was understanding his legal position, and he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The conversation with the lawyer was both enlightening and overwhelming. Richard learned about the complexities of dividing marital assets, the importance of gathering evidence, and how proof of Margaret's infidelity could work in his favor during the divorce proceedings. Realizing how much was at stake, he knew he had to collect as much evidence as possible. He began documenting everything: Margaret's sudden late-night disappearances, her suspicious behavior, and the incident with Charlie at the party. Though the situation seemed bleak, Richard found solace in the realization that he wasn't entirely alone. He needed an ally, someone who could help him navigate the challenges ahead. Jennifer came to mind. She had been a close friend since college, always sharp-witted, pragmatic, and incredibly loyal. If anyone could help him make sense of this chaos, it was her. They met at a quiet cafe, a familiar spot where they often shared life's joys and struggles. As Richard began telling his story, Jennifer listened intently, her expression growing more serious with each new detail. "Richard," she finally said, her voice firm and filled with resolve, "you deserve so much more. You've been nothing but devoted, and now it's time to stand up for yourself. Don't let Margaret crush you. It's time to fight back." Her words reignited a spark in Richard, restoring his sense of purpose that had been dulled by years of self-sacrifice. Now he was ready to face whatever awaited him. Richard's resolve grew stronger with every word from Jennifer. Together, they devised strategies to counter the mounting threats from Margaret. Jennifer suggested hiring a private investigator, someone who could obtain concrete evidence of Margaret's infidelity, which could play a key role in the upcoming divorce proceedings. "Think of it as insurance," she advised. "You need to be prepared for any blows she might deliver." This wasn't just about money or material possessions. It was about Richard's pride and the future he was determined to protect. Jennifer's support gave him a fresh perspective on the situation, and with her encouragement, Richard gained clarity. He carefully planned his next moves, maintaining an outward calm around Margaret while secretly gathering evidence to strengthen his position. He also took precautions to safeguard his finances, discreetly opening a new bank account and transferring funds to protect himself from sudden financial manipulations by Margaret. This gave him a small sense of control in a situation that felt overwhelming. Over time, Richard became more adept at handling the tense atmosphere of their marriage. He remained polite but distant, speaking to Margaret only when necessary, trying not to reveal his true intentions. It was a delicate balancing act, requiring constant vigilance and restraint. At the same time, Richard began focusing on his own well-being, something he had long neglected. He started exercising regularly, and the rhythmic pounding of his feet on the pavement during runs gave him peace of mind and mental clarity. Physical activity became a form of therapy, helping him prepare for the battles ahead. He also reconnected with old friends, whose relationships had faded over the years. Their presence reminded him of who he had been before the marriage consumed his identity. Their support became an important source of strength, helping Richard regain a sense of self-worth, despite the world around him falling apart. Each day he felt more ready for the challenges to come. Though the path he had chosen was fraught with obstacles and uncertainty, he remained steadfast in his decision. The betrayal that had once shattered him now unearthed a hidden strength he hadn't known existed. Sitting alone in the silence of his home, Richard felt the weight of the future pressing on his shoulders. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but it was a path he was prepared to walk. This wasn't just about survival, it was a fight to protect the life he had worked so hard to build. And in this fight, he rediscovered his strength and purpose. The courtroom was a stark contrast to the lively chaos of the party where it all began. Tension filled the air as the divorce proceedings got underway. Richard sat on one side, his hands clenched on his lap. After weeks of preparation, he felt fortified by the knowledge that he had done everything he could to protect himself. Beside him sat Jennifer, her presence instilling confidence. On the opposite side, Margaret appeared self-assured. Her expression was cold, her posture composed. She had always been able to maintain control, and now she seemed determined to claim what she believed was rightfully hers. Her attorney was an imposing figure, known for winning even the toughest cases. When the proceedings began, Margaret's lawyer presented a carefully crafted narrative, painting her as a victim in a marriage that had gradually deteriorated. She demanded a significant portion of their assets, citing her contribution to their lifestyle and financial independence as the basis for her claims. Richard listened intently, his heart racing. This was the moment he had feared, the possibility of losing everything he had worked so hard to build. But he steeled himself, reminding himself of the evidence he had gathered and the thoroughness of his plans. When it was Richard's turn, his attorney stood to present their case. "Your Honor, we have evidence not only proving Mrs. Taylor's infidelity, but also highlighting her professional misconduct. We believe this will significantly impact the court's decision regarding the division of assets." A heavy silence hung in the room. All eyes turned to Margaret, who shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Richard's lawyer methodically presented the evidence, including photos and documents that left little doubt about her betrayal. The private investigators' reports were detailed, outlining Margaret's affair with Charlie and exposing her questionable activities at work. Margaret's downfall was swift when undeniable evidence of her misconduct surfaced, exposing violations of both corporate policies and moral norms. The courtroom echoed with a reading of incriminating emails and messages, each one dismantling the carefully constructed reputation she had long defended. The atmosphere shifted, filled with shock and disbelief as new facts were revealed. Margaret's lawyer tried to object, but it was too late. The damage was irreversible. The judge's gaze, sharp and unforgiving, settled on her. "Mrs. Taylor, these are serious accusations. Do you have anything to say in your defense?" His voice was firm, leaving no room for evasive responses. Margaret hesitated, momentarily speechless. The confidence she had maintained throughout the trial began to crumble. She cast a desperate glance at her lawyer, but even he seemed powerless against the overwhelming evidence. Her posture slumped, betraying her anxiety. Her face flickered with a range of emotions: indignation, despair. "Your Honor, my personal life has nothing to do with the division of property," she insisted, trying to regain control of the situation. "I've worked hard for all of this," she added defensively. The judge responded calmly, but his words left no doubt. "That may be true, Mrs. Taylor, but the court must consider all aspects of the case, including your character and actions." As the trial continued, Richard felt the tide turning in his favor. Witness after witness testified, supporting the allegations against Margaret. Former colleagues described her erratic behavior at work, and friends, albeit reluctantly, confirmed her infidelity. When the judge called a recess, a tense silence hung in the air. Richard sat in that silence, feeling the weight of uncertainty looming over him. Regardless of the final verdict, he already knew that this ordeal had changed him forever. When the judge returned to the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Richard held his breath as the judge began to speak. "After reviewing all the evidence, the court rules in favor of Mr. Taylor," the judge declared firmly. Mrs. Taylor's actions are deemed harmful, and the division of property will reflect this. Mr. Taylor will retain the majority of the marital assets, and no alimony will be awarded. A wave of relief washed over Richard, wiping away months of stress and anxiety. Jennifer, seated beside him, squeezed his hand, her eyes glowing with pride and support. On the other side of the courtroom, Margaret sat in stunned silence, fully grasping the weight of her situation. Despite everything, Richard felt a fleeting sense of pity. He had once loved her deeply, and the end of their marriage was a bittersweet conclusion to their shared history. Outside, the sun shone brightly, in stark contrast to the emotional storm that had raged inside. Richard took a deep breath, feeling the enormous burden lift from his shoulders. He hadn't fought out of malice or revenge, but to protect the life he had worked so hard to build. He knew there would still be challenges ahead, and memories of this painful chapter would haunt him. But now, he felt stronger, more resilient, and ready to face whatever the future might bring. As he and Jennifer walked away from the courthouse, a faint smile crossed his face. It felt like a new beginning, a chance to rebuild himself and rediscover his identity. In the weeks that followed, the aftermath of the trial struck Margaret's life with brutal force. The evidence of her professional misconduct and her affair with Charlie shattered her once impenetrable reputation. The corporate world, where she had once thrived, quickly turned its back on her. The company she had invested so much time and identity in could no longer afford the scandal. Her dismissal came swiftly and mercilessly, marking a humiliating end to the career she had once believed was untouchable. Charlie, who had benefited from Margaret's success and leveraged her position for his own gain, also found himself at a dead end. With Margaret's fall, his connections vanished, and the opportunities he had taken for granted evaporated. Colleagues who had once welcomed him with open arms now avoided him, unwilling to be associated with his disgrace. Without Margaret's influence, his professional standing collapsed. The bitter truth hit them both. Margaret and Charlie, once accustomed to the privileges and luxuries their careers had provided, now faced the harsh reality of starting over from nothing. After the glamorous facade of their once thriving life crumbled and their professional reputation was destroyed, they stood on the brink of financial ruin. What once seemed like an exhilarating adventure of secret intrigues became the catalyst for their downfall. Their life turned into a grim cautionary tale, a testament to the dangers of arrogance and infidelity. For Richard, the conclusion of the legal saga was not just an end, but the beginning of an unexpected journey. Although the legal victory had been exhausting and draining, its resolution brought him a surprising sense of freedom and relief. The oppressive weight of a failed marriage, compounded by the pain of betrayal, was finally lifted. Freed from these burdens, he could now focus solely on his own desires, no longer constrained by Margaret's excessive ambitions. Old passions resurfaced, and new interests shone with renewed vigor. Photography, once a forgotten hobby, became his way of reconnecting with the world around him. Every time he pressed the shutter, it wasn't just a photograph. It was a tangible moment on his path to rediscovery and newfound joy. He visited the places he had always dreamed of seeing, and each journey reminded him that his life now belonged only to him. In this new chapter, the unwavering support of friends and family became his foundation. Their backing provided him with the much-needed sense of stability during his most difficult times, highlighting the importance of genuine relationships. Among these people, Jennifer's constant support stood out. Their friendship remained strong and deepened, built on mutual respect and shared experiences. Richard often reflected on the trials he had endured: betrayal, divorce, and his desperate struggle to reclaim his sense of self-worth. These hardships pushed him to his limits, but he emerged stronger, with a clearer understanding of what truly mattered. He learned to value the lessons his marriage had taught him, realizing that, despite the bitter end, there were moments of genuine happiness and personal growth. Instead of drowning in regrets, He cherished these memories as important milestones on his journey to self-awareness. As he entered this new stage of life, Richard found a peace he hadn't expected, a quiet sense of satisfaction from finally living by his own rules. Standing on the threshold of this new beginning, he looked to the future with optimism, grateful for the wisdom his past had given him, and ready for whatever lay ahead. Margaret's downfall led her to complete isolation. Now she had no home, no job, and no support from friends. The stress and turmoil she experienced resulted in a stroke, leaving her a bedridden, incapacitated, lonely woman. Perhaps it was karma that caught up with Margaret for her sins. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.